Sweat beaded on Jenny's forehead as she hurried out of the courtroom, her mind racing. The judge's words still echoed in her ears. A $10,000 fine levied by the HOA for a simple parking violation. How had it escalated to this? She replayed the fateful day in her mind. It had been raining, and in her haste to get inside, she'd parked slightly over the line on the community's narrow street. Within minutes, a stern-faced HOA representative had slapped a ticket on her windshield. "This is unacceptable," the man had declared, his eyes narrowed with contempt. "You're blocking access for emergency vehicles. A fine will be issued immediately." Jenny had tried to reason with him, to explain the extenuating circumstances, but he had cut her off, his lips pressed into a tight, unyielding line. "The rules are clear, Mrs. Sanders. You will receive the citation in the mail." Now, as she walked to her car, Jenny's hands trembled. $10,000. That was more than half her annual salary. How would she possibly pay such an exorbitant fine? Her heart raced with panic and anger. This couldn't be happening. Sliding behind the wheel, Jenny gripped the steering wheel, her knuckles turning white. She had to do something, but what? The HOA was clearly hell-bent on making an example of her, and the thought of a protracted legal battle only added to her growing sense of dread. As she pulled out of the parking lot, a glimmer of determination began to take root. She wouldn't go down without a fight. Somehow, she would find a way to challenge this outrageous fine and restore some semblance of justice. Later that evening, Jenny paced back and forth in her living room, her mind a whirlwind of worry and indignation. The $10,000 fine loomed over her like a dark cloud, threatening to consume her every waking moment. She paused in front of the fireplace, her gaze drawn to the framed family photos on the mantel. Her children's smiling faces stared back at her, a stark contrast to the turmoil she now faced. "I can't let this happen," she murmured aloud, her voice laced with determination. "I have to fight this, for their sake." Grabbing her laptop, Jenny began frantically searching for legal resources, her fingers flying across the keyboard. She needed to find a way to challenge the HOA's decision, to prove that the fine was unjust and disproportionate. As she delved deeper into her research, a glimmer of hope emerged. The more she learned of the HOA's policies and the legal precedents surrounding similar cases, the more she realized that she might have a fighting chance. With renewed energy, Jenny reached for her phone and began dialing the number of a local attorney she'd have found online. If anyone could help her navigate this complex legal landscape, it would be a seasoned professional. "Hello, this is Jenny Sanders," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil swirling within her. "I need your help. My HOA is suing me for a $10,000 fine, and I'm determined to fight this." The attorney on the other end of the line listened intently, his brow furrowing with concern. "This is a serious matter, Mrs. Sanders," he replied, "but I believe we may have a case. Let's schedule a meeting to discuss your options." Jenny's heart leaped with hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could find a way to overcome this daunting challenge and protect her family's financial future. The next morning, Jenny arrived at the attorney's office, her nerves frayed, but her determination unwavering. As she shook hands with the tall, gray-haired man, she couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice, Mr. Jacobs," she said, her voice tinged with gratitude. "Of course, Mrs. Sanders," the attorney replied, gesturing for her to take a seat. "I've reviewed the details of your case, and I must say, this seems like an egregious overreach by the HOA." Jenny nodded, her brow furrowed with worry. "I couldn't agree more. This fine is completely disproportionate to the offense. I can't even begin to imagine how I'd pay it." Mr. Jacobs leaned forward, his gaze sympathetic. "I understand your concern, and I want you to know that we're going to do everything in our power to fight this. However, I must warn you, this is not going to be an easy battle." Jenny steeled herself, her jaw set with determination. "I'm prepared to do whatever it takes." This isn't just about the money. It's about standing up to an unjust system that's trampling on the rights of homeowners. The attorney nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. That's exactly the kind of fighting spirit we'll need. Now let's go over the details of your case and start building our strategy. For the next hour, Jenny and Mr. Jacobs pored over the HOA's bylaws, looking for any loopholes or inconsistencies that could work in their favor. They discussed potential legal arguments, the possibility of negotiating a reduced fine, and the risks of taking the matter to court. As Jenny left the attorney's office, she felt a renewed sense of hope. She knew the road ahead would be long and arduous, but she was more determined than ever to stand her ground and fight for what was right. Over the next few weeks, Jenny and her attorney, Mr. Jacobs, worked tirelessly to prepare their case against the HOA. They combed through reams of documents, interviewed potential witnesses, and formulated a comprehensive legal strategy. As the court date approached, the tension in Jenny's household continued to mount. Her husband, Mark, tried his best to remain supportive, but the looming financial burden weighed heavily on both of them. "I know you're doing everything you can, honey," he said one evening, his hand squeezing hers reassuringly. "But what if we can't win this? $10,000 is an astronomical sum. I'm worried about how we'll make ends meet." Jenny squeezed his hand back, her gaze resolute. "We have to win, Mark. I can't accept the alternative. It would devastate our family. We have to at least try." Mark nodded, his expression a mix of concern and admiration. "I know. I'm with you. No matter what, we'll get through this together." As the day of the court hearing arrived, Jenny found herself gripped by a mixture of nerves and determination. She had poured her heart and soul into this case, and she wasn't about to back down now. Stepping into the courtroom, she took a deep breath, her eyes scanning the familiar faces of the HOA board members. They sat in the front row, their expressions smug and unyielding. When the judge called the case, Jenny and Mr. Jacobs rose to present their arguments. They meticulously laid out the details of the incident, the disproportionate nature of the fine, and the HOA's apparent disregard for the extenuating circumstances. As the hearing progressed, Jenny could feel the tension in the room mounting. The HOA's representatives fought back, defending their actions and insisting that the fine was justified. The debate grew heated, with both sides passionately presenting their case. Finally, the judge called for a recess, promising to deliver his ruling the following day. As Jenny and Mr. Jacobs exited the courtroom, she couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, justice would prevail. The next day, Jenny and Mark sat anxiously in the courtroom, their hands clasped tightly together. The air was thick with anticipation as the judge took his seat and called the hearing back to order. Jenny's heart pounded in her chest as the judge began to speak, his voice measured and deliberate. "After carefully considering the arguments presented by both sides, I have reached a decision in the matter of Mrs. Sanders and the HOA fine." Jenny held her breath, her fingers digging into Mark's hand. "I find the $10,000 fine levied by the HOA to be excessive and disproportionate to the offense committed. While the community's parking regulations are reasonable and necessary, the punishment in this case does not fit the crime." A wave of relief washed over Jenny, and she felt tears of joy spring to her eyes. The judge continued, his tone firm. "Therefore, I am ruling in favor of Mrs. Sanders and ordering the HOA to rescind the fine immediately. Furthermore, I am issuing a warning to the HOA board to reevaluate their policies and ensure that any future fines are fair and proportionate to the infractions." The courtroom erupted in a mix of cheers and murmurs, and Jenny felt Mark's arms wrap around her in a tight embrace. "You did it, honey," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you." Jenny clutched her husband, a sense of overwhelming gratitude and vindication flooding her heart. She had stood up to the HOA's abuse of power and won, and the victory felt all the sweeter for the hard-fought battle. As she and Mark left the courthouse, hand in hand, Jenny knew that this was just the beginning. She was determined to use her newfound momentum to advocate for change, to ensure that no other homeowner would have to endure the kind of injustice she had faced. In the weeks following the court victory, Jenny found herself thrust into the spotlight. Local news outlets had covered the story, and she had quickly become a symbol of resistance against overzealous HOA practices. Emails and phone calls poured in from other homeowners in the area, all eager to share their own stories of HOA abuse and to seek her advice. Jenny, emboldened by her success, knew she couldn't let this momentum go to waste. "We need to organize," she told Mark one evening, her eyes shining with determination. "This isn't just about my case. It's about standing up for the rights of all homeowners in our community." Mark nodded, his expression a mix of pride and concern. "I'm with you, honey, but be careful. The HOA board isn't going to take this lying down. They're probably furious that you beat them in court." Jenny's jaw tightened. "I know, but I'm not backing down. It's time to fight fire with fire." Over the next few weeks, Jenny worked tirelessly to rally her fellow homeowners. She created a website, organized town hall meetings, and reached out to local politicians, all with the goal of bringing the HOA's abuses to light and effecting real change. The HOA board, for their part, was not pleased. They responded with a barrage of aggressive tactics, from threatening legal action to attempting to revoke Jenny's own HOA membership. But Jenny refused to be intimidated, and her grassroots movement only continued to grow. As the battle lines were drawn, tensions in the community reached a fever pitch. Neighbors found themselves pitted against one another, with the HOA board and its supporters on one side and Jenny's growing coalition on the other. The stakes were high, and Jenny knew that the outcome of this conflict would have far-reaching implications for the entire neighborhood. But she was more determined than ever to see it through, no matter the cost. The tension in the community had reached a boiling point, and Jenny found herself at the center of a growing storm. The HOA board, furious at her refusal to back down, had launched an all-out campaign to discredit her and undermine her efforts. Flyers were distributed throughout the neighborhood, painting Jenny as a rabble-rouser and accusing her of inciting unrest. Neighbors who had once supported her were now turning against her, swayed by the HOA's relentless propaganda. Jenny's own home had even been the target of vandalism, with her car tires slashed and her front lawn covered in derogatory graffiti. The emotional toll of the ongoing battle was beginning to take its on her and her family. But still, Jenny refused to give up. She knew that the stakes were too high to back down now. This was a fight for the very soul of their community, and she was determined to see it through to the end. One evening, as Jenny was preparing dinner, her phone rang. It was the local news station, requesting an interview. "The community is in turmoil, and we want to hear your side of the story," the reporter said, her voice brimming with urgency. Jenny hesitated for a moment, weighing the risks and rewards. She knew that going public could further inflame tensions, but it was also an opportunity to reach a wider audience and bring more attention to the issue. After a moment of consideration, she made her decision. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steady. "It's time for the truth to be heard." As the interview cameras rolled, Jenny poured her heart out, eloquently articulating the injustices that had led her to this point. She spoke of the HOA's abuses, the disproportionate fines, and the need for comprehensive reform. The interview was a resounding success, and it quickly went viral, sparking a nationwide conversation about the power of HOAs and the rights of homeowners. Jenny's story had struck a chord, and she knew that the tide was finally turning in her favor. But the battle was far from over, and Jenny knew that she would need to remain vigilant and resolute in the face of the HOA's continued onslaught. In the weeks that followed the explosive news interview, Jenny's crusade against the HOA had gained significant momentum. Her story had resonated with homeowners across the country, and she had become a symbol of resistance against abusive HOA practices. The local community, once divided, had rallied behind her. Neighbors who had once been swayed by the HOA's propaganda now stood shoulder to shoulder with Jenny, determined to fight for their rights and restore a sense of fairness and justice to their neighborhood. As the pressure mounted, the HOA board found themselves on the defensive. They had attempted to retaliate against Jenny, but her growing network of supporters and the national spotlight made their efforts increasingly futile. Finally, after months of relentless campaigning and legal battles, Jenny and her team of homeowners achieved a landmark victory. The HOA board was forced to undergo a complete overhaul, with new members appointed who were committed to reforming the organization's policies and restoring the trust of the community. The $10,000 fine had sparked this entire ordeal was officially rescinded, and the HOA agreed to implement stricter guidelines for issuing fines, ensuring that they would be proportionate and fair. As Jenny stood in her living room, surrounded by her family and her newfound allies, she couldn't help but feel a sense of profound pride and accomplishment. They had faced overwhelming odds and emerged victorious, proving that even the most entrenched systems of power could be challenged and reformed. "This is just the beginning," she said, her voice brimming with determination. "We've shown that when homeowners come together, we can make a real difference. And I'm not going to stop until we've created a community that truly works for all of us." With those words, Jenny knew that her fight had only just begun. But with the support of her neighbors and the newfound momentum of their movement, she was more ready than ever to take on the challenges that lay ahead.